The first night I came back to my grandparents' house, I already felt something was wrong. The place looked exactly the same as I remembered it from childhood. Same cracked driveway, same dead tree, leaning over the roof, like it was trying to listen through the attic. Even the porch light still flickered every few seconds, throwing weak yellow flashes across the yard. But the house felt different. Quieter, not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet. The kind that makes you notice every tiny sound. I hadn't been there in almost 8 years. After my grandmother passed away, I stopped visiting. Life got busy. College. Work. Excuses. But when my mom called and told me Grandpa's memory was getting worse, I finally decided to come back for a few days. He looked older than I expected, much older. His skin looked pale and paper-thin. His hands shook when he held his coffee, but his eyes were still sharp. Too sharp, like he was always paying attention to something nobody else could see. That first evening felt normal enough. We ate dinner in silence while the old TV hummed in the living room. Grandpa barely touched his food. Every few minutes, he glanced toward the hallway vent near the flue. Not directly at it. Just quick little looks, like he was checking if something was still there. I noticed it, but I didn't say anything. Around midnight, I went upstairs to my old bedroom. The room smelled like dust and old books. Nothing had changed. My baseball trophy still sat crooked on the shelf. The wallpaper still peeled near the window. I remember lying there, unable to sleep. The house made sounds all night. Pipes ticking, floorboards creaking, wind rubbing branches against the siding. Then I heard whispering. At first, I thought it was the TV downstairs, but this was different. Closer, soft enough that I couldn't make out the words. I sat up in bed and listened carefully. The whispering continued. Slow, steady, like someone having a private conversation. That's when I realized it was coming from the air vent beside my bed. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. The vent was old, covered in dust, the metal slightly bent at the corners. Then I heard my grandfather's voice. I knew it instantly. Low, weak, nervous. He was whispering into another vent somewhere downstairs. I climbed out of bed carefully and knelt beside the vent. The metal felt freezing cold against my skin. I could hear him clearer now. I told you she's gone, he whispered. Silence followed. Then Grandpa spoke again. No. No, he just got here today. A chill crawled up my back. At first, I thought maybe he was talking on the phone. Maybe his hearing was bad, and he used the vents somehow to hear better. But then I realized something impossible. There was no second voice. At least, not one I could fully hear. There was breathing, faint, uneven, like somebody exhaling directly into the vent from the other side. I pulled away immediately. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I remember standing there in the dark, staring at that vent, while my brain tried to explain what I was hearing. Then, Grandpa laughed quietly downstairs. Not a happy laugh, a scared laugh. The kind people make when they're trying to calm themselves down. You always say that, he whispered. Another pause. His voice dropped even lower. Number he doesn't know about the walls. The walls. The walls. I felt my stomach tighten. Every childhood memory I had of that house suddenly came rushing back at once. Duh. Strange cold spots. The scratching noises at night. The way my grandmother used to keep every vent in the house shut during winter, even when it made the rooms freezing cold. I used to ask her why. She always gave the same answer. Old houses carry old things. Back then, I thought she meant rats. Now I wasn't so sure. I leaned closer again before I could stop myself. Please, Grandpa whispered suddenly. Not tonight. Then came the sound that still ruins my sleep. A whisper answered him back. Not loud, not clear, but real. I know what human voices sound like through vents. This wasn't that. The voice sounded dry, almost dusty, like words being forced through a throat that hadn't spoken in years. I couldn't understand most of it, except for 3 words. He hears us now. I stumbled backwards so fast, I hit the dresser behind me. One of my trophies crashed onto the floor. The whispering downstairs stopped instantly. Complete silence filled the house. Then I heard slow footsteps downstairs. My grandfather's footsteps. moving toward the stairs. I stood frozen in the middle of the room as the steps creaked one by one, not rushing, slow, careful, like you're. Reddy knew exactly where I was. The hallway outside my room went dark when the upstairs light clicked off. I never heard him touch the switch. Then his voice came from the other side of my bedroom door. Soft, barely above a whisper. You shouldn't listen through the vents. The next morning, Grandpa acted like nothing had happened. That was the worst part. I barely slept after hearing him outside my bedroom door. I stayed awake until sunrise, staring at the vent beside my bed, waiting to hear the whispering again. Every tiny sound made my chest tighten. The soft rattle of air moving through the ducts sounded different now. Alive somehow. When morning finally came, I went downstairs expecting awkward silence or maybe some explanation. Instead, Grandpa was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee like every normal old man on earth. The TV played softly in the background. Weather reports, traffic updates. Completely ordinary. He looked up at me and smiled. You sleep all right? He asked. His voice sounded calm, too calm. I stared at him for a second, trying to figure out if he was pretending or if something was seriously wrong with him mentally. You were talking. Last night, I said carefully. His hand froze around the coffee mug, only for a second. Then he took another sip. Old people talk to themselves, he muttered. I watched him closely. Dark circles hung under his eyes like bruises. He looked exhausted. But there was something else too. Nervousness. His eyes kept shifting toward the floor vent near the refrigerator. Again. Always the vents. I tried laughing it off. Sounded like you were having a whole conversation. Grandpa didn't smile. The kitchen suddenly felt colder. You shouldn't listen to things at night in this house, he said quietly. Not angry, not joking, serious. I opened my mouth to ask another question, but he stood up too fast, nearly knocking his chair over. I need to check the furnace, he said. Then he walked down the hallway toward the basement door. The moment he disappeared downstairs, I noticed something strange. Every vent in the kitchen had been taped around the edges. Old gray duct tape, like someone was trying to seal them shut. I never noticed it before. I walked over slowly and crouched beside one of the vents. The tape looked fresh in some places and layered in others, like it has. They'd been replaced again and again over the years. Then I heard it, a soft tapping sound, 3 taps. Coming from inside the vent, I froze. The tapping stopped immediately. For a moment, I told myself it was just the pipes. Old houses make noises. That's what people always say. But deep down, I knew better, because a few seconds later, the vent let out a long, slow breath of cold air directly against my face. The furnace wasn't even running. I backed away so fast I hit the counter behind me. That's when Grandpa slammed the basement door open. The sound made me jump. He stood there staring at me from the hallway. His expression looked panicked, not angry, scared. Did you touch the vents? He asked. I shook my head immediately. He kept staring at me like he was trying to decide whether I was lying. Then his eyes slowly moved toward the kitchen vent. I'll never forget the look on his face. Pure dread. He walked over quickly and pressed his trembling hand against the metal cover. For a second, everything went completely silent. Then Grandpa whispered something under his breath. I couldn't hear the words clearly. It sounded almost like an apology. After that, he grabbed another roll of duct tape from a drawer and started pressing fresh strips around the vent, without saying a word. The whole thing felt insane. What are you doing? I asked. He ignored me. Grandpa, that's still nothing. He just kept sealing the edges tighter and tighter, his hands shaking the entire time. Finally, he stopped and looked at me. You ever hear scratching in your room when you were little? He asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I nodded slowly. Every night when I was a kid, tiny scratching sounds inside the walls. I used to think it was rats. Grandpa looked down at the floor. Your grandma used to hear it too, he whispered. A heavy silence filled the kitchen. Then the vent behind him made a noise. Not loud, just a soft metallic pop, like pressure shifting inside the ducts. But Grandpa flinched immediately. His face went pale. You need to stop listening, he said quickly. To what? He looked straight at me for the first time all morning. The house. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell him this was ridiculous. But I couldn't. Because deep down, something felt wrong in that place. Not haunted exactly. Worse. Familiar. Oh. Like the house had been quietly watching us for years. The rest of the day only got stranger. Grandpa stayed close to the vents constantly. If we sat in the living room, he'd lower the TV volume any time he heard even the smallest sound from the ductwork. During lunch, I caught him staring into the hallway vent for nearly 5 straight minutes without blinking. At one point, I heard him whispering again, very quietly. I couldn't make out the words this time, but he wasn't alone in the room. I know how crazy that sounds. There was nobody there physically, but the air felt crowded. That evening, rain started pouring outside. Heavy rain. The kind that makes old houses groan. The power flickered twice during dinner. Grandpa barely ate again. Then suddenly, all the lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the house. Complete darkness swallowed the house. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The only sound was rain hammering the roof. Then came the noise. A long, scraping sound moving through the vents overhead, slowly traveling from room to room. Grandpa stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. "No," he whispered. The scraping stopped directly above us, right above the kitchen ceiling. I felt my stomach twist. Then something softly knocked from inside the vent beside the table. 3 slow knocks. Grandpa grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. "Don't answer it," he whispered. I couldn't stop thinking about the knocks. Even after the power came back on 20 minutes later, my hands still felt cold. Grandpa acted like none of it happened. He picked up his fallen chair, turned the TV back on, and sat there staring blankly at the screen, while rain slammed against the windows outside. But I noticed something strange. He kept rubbing his thumb against his wedding ring, over and over, like he only did it when he was nervous. That night, I told myself I was done listening to the vents. Done paying attention to the noises. I even shoved a pillow over the vent in my bedroom before trying to sleep. But around 1:30 in the morning, I woke up anyway, not because of sound, because of silence. The house had gone completely still. No rain, no creaking, no wind outside, nothing. I opened my eyes slowly and immediately noticed something wrong. My bedroom door was open. I always closed it before sleeping, every time. A faint yellow light stretched across the H. Hallway floor outside my room. I sat up carefully, my chest already tightening. Then I heard Grandpa's voice, very soft, coming from downstairs, whispering again. I remember trying to convince myself not to go look. Every instinct told me to stay in bed. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when fear gets mixed into it. I stepped into the hallway quietly and followed the sound down the stairs. The house felt colder than before. Not normal cold either. Damn cold, like stepping into a basement. Halfway down the stairs, I finally saw him. Grandpa was kneeling on the floor in the hallway near the living room vent. The overhead light flickered weakly above him. He was leaning so close to the vent that his forehead nearly touched the metal, and he was whispering. "I said he doesn't understand," Grandpa murmured. A long pause followed. Then he nodded slowly. "No." "He heard you." My stomach dropped. The vent answered him. Not loudly, not clearly, but enough. Enough to know another voice was speaking back. I gripped the stair railing so hard, my fingers hurt. The voice sounded wrong in a way I can't fully explain. It wasn't deep or growling like something from a movie. That would have been easier to understand. This sounded human, almost. Like someone copying human speech without understanding how conversations work. The words came too slowly. The breathing between them lasted too long. I watched Grandpa lower his head. "She is to hear you too," he whispered. The vent gave a soft, rattling sound. Then Grandpa said something that made my skin crawl. "That's why Helen covered the vents." Helen covered the vents. Helen, my grandmother. For a second, I stopped breathing. I had completely forgotten about that. When I was little, Grandma always kept furniture pushed against certain vents in the house. She used heavy rugs too, even during summer. I used to think she hated drafts. Now I realized she was hiding them. Or trying to. The vent crackled softly again. Grandpa's shoulders stiffened. No, he whispered quickly. Not him. Silence. Then came the sound. A slow inhale. No from Grandpa, from inside the vent. The metal cover trembled slightly as air passed through it. And then I heard it clearly for the first time. Let me talk to him. I nearly fell backward. My foot slipped against the wooden stair. The noise echoed through the hallway. Grandpa's head snapped toward me instantly. For one horrible second, neither of us moved. Then his face changed completely. Pure panic. Go upstairs, he said sharply. I couldn't move. The vent behind him let out a low clicking sound, like fingernails tapping metal from the inside. Grandpa stood up too fast and stepped between me and the vent. Now. I had never heard him raise his voice before. I stumbled backward up the stairs while he kept staring at the vent behind him. The clicking got faster. Tap, 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 tap. I reached the top of the stairs and looked down one last time. Grandpa was whispering again. Fast this time, desperate. Please leave him alone. The hallway light flickered once, twice. Then, every vent in the house suddenly made the same sound at once. Breathing. Long. Slow. Wet breaths. Coming from inside the walls. I ran back into my bedroom and slammed the door shut. The breathing continued. Not loud, but everywhere. Inside the vents. Inside the ceiling. Inside the walls beside my bed. I grabbed my phone immediately, ready to call somebody. Anybody. But I stopped when I noticed something strange. No signal. No signal. Not even one bar. The screen flickered slightly in my hand before going dark completely. Then came a whisper beside my bed, not through the vent, beside it. Close enough that it sounded like someone kneeling on the floor next to me. You came back. I froze completely. The voice sounded clearer now. Still wrong. Still dry and hollow, but clearer. I slowly turned my head toward the vent. Nothing there, just darkness. Then the metal vent cover creaked softly, like pressure was pushing against it from inside. I backed away until my legs hit the wall behind me. The vent rattled harder. A scraping sound moved through the duct slowly. Closer. Closer. Then suddenly, it stopped directly beneath me. Complete silence filled the room again. A few seconds later, Grandpa started pounding on my bedroom door. Don't answer if it talks to you, he shouted. His voice sounded terrified, not confused, not crazy. Terrified, because he already knew what was happening. The vent beside my bed let out another tiny metallic pop. Then the whisper came again, this time using my voice. Perfectly. Open the vent. I didn't open the vent. I didn't open the vent. I couldn't. My entire body locked up the M. Moment that thing copied my voice. Every instinct inside me screamed that if I touched the vent, something terrible would happen. Grandpa kept pounding on the bedroom door. Move away from it, he yelled. I stumbled toward the door so fast I nearly fell. The vent behind me rattled violently for a second, then stopped the moment. Grandpa forced the door open. He rushed inside and slammed it shut behind him. For the first time since I arrived, he looked completely broken. Not confused, not forgetful, broken. Sweat covered his face even though the room felt freezing cold. His hands shook so badly he could barely lock the door. Then he grabbed the chair and shoved it hard against the vent beside my bed. Not because the vent was large enough for someone to crawl through, because he genuinely believed something could come out of it anyway. Grandpa, I whispered. He raised a trembling finger immediately. Don't talk loud. The way he said it made my chest tighten. We stood there in silence for nearly a minute. I could hear both of us breathing. The old house creaked softly around us. Then came a faint scratching sound from inside the vent, very soft, like fingertips drag. Ink slowly against metal. Grandpa closed his eyes the moment he heard it, almost like he was exhausted. Still there, he muttered under his breath. I stared at him. What is that thing? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward my dresser and opened one of the drawers. He pulled out an old towel and shoved it into another small vent near the floor. Only then did he finally speak. It wasn't always like this, he said quietly. The scratching stopped. Complete silence filled the room again. Grandpa sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. He suddenly looked older than ever, smaller somehow. I thought it was the pipes at first, he whispered. Back when your grandma and I first moved here. I stayed standing near the door, afraid to get closer to the vents. The whispering started after the first winter. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor while he talked. At night, we'd hear voices moving through the house. Faint, like neighbors talking through thin walls. He swallowed hard, but there were no neighbors close enough. The room suddenly felt colder. I noticed Grandpa still rubbing his wedding ring with his thumb. Over and over. Your grandma heart. I did before I did, he continued. She said the vents carried voices after midnight. Another scratching noise came from inside the wall. Closer this time, Grandpa immediately stopped talking. We both stared at the vent under the chair. Silence again. Then a weak little knock echoed through the metal. 3 taps. My stomach turned. Grandpa leaned forward slowly. You see, he whispered to me. It listens. I wanted to tell him this was impossible. Some kind of shared paranoia. Maybe dementia. Maybe stress. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't normal, because I heard it too. Grandpa lowered his voice even further. It learns people. The sentence hit me harder than anything else he'd said. What does that mean? He looked toward the vent again, before answering. At first, it only whispered random things. Small things. But the longer you stay around it, he paused, nervously. The more it sounds like somebody you trust. A chill spread through my arms. I remembered hearing my own voice minutes earlier. Perfectly copied. Grandpa noticed my expression immediately. It used your voice already, didn't it? I nodded slowly, his face drained of color. That's bad. The house groaned softly around us as wind pushed against the windows outside. Somewhere downstairs, a floorboard creaked, then another, the slow footsteps, moving through the hallway below us. I looked toward the bedroom door. Someone's downstairs. Grandpa didn't react. Instead, he whispered something that made my blood run cold. No one else is here. The footsteps continued anyway. Very slow, very heavy, crossing the living room beneath us. I realized something horrible then. The sounds didn't match normal footsteps. They were uneven, like somebody imitating the rhythm of walking without understanding how humans move. Step, pause. Step, step, long pause. Then another step. The sound slowly stopped, directly beneath my bedroom floor. The scratching inside the vent immediately returned, louder now. Grandpa stood up fast. Stay away from the walls, he whispered sharply. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the center of the room. Then the whispering started again, not from one vent, from all of them. From all of them. Soft overlapping voices. Too quiet to fully understand, but enough to hear certain words repeating. Open. Code. Let us. My breath in. G got shallow. The voices sounded different now. Not just one speaker. Multiple. Some sounded old. Some sounded young. One of them sounded exactly like my grandmother. I froze. Grandpa heard it too. Tears instantly filled his eyes. That scared me more than anything else. Because his expression wasn't shock. It was guilt. The voice whispered again through the vent near the floor. Soft, gentle, Arthur. Grandpa's real name. He shut his eyes immediately. Don't, he whispered back. The voice continued. We're still here. I stared at him in disbelief. You've been talking to this thing the whole time. His shoulders sank. You don't understand, he whispered. Then he looked at me with the most exhausted expression I've ever seen. It gets louder when you ignore it. The scratching suddenly became violent. Metal rattled beneath the chair, blocking the vent. The chair shifted slightly across the floor. I backed against the wall in panic. Grandpa moved quickly and shoved the chair back into place with both hands. The whispering rose louder inside the walls around us. Dozens of faint voices overlapping each other. Some crying, some laughing softly, some repeating words I couldn't understand. Then, through all the noise, one voice became perfectly clear. My grandmother's voice. I told you he'd come back. The moment I heard my grandmother's voice, something inside me broke. Not because I believed in ghosts, because it sounded exactly like her. Every detail. The softness in her voice. The slight crack near the end of certain words. Even the calm tone she used whenever I got scared as a kid. For one horrible second, my brain actually wanted to believe it was her. That scared me more than the whispering itself. Grandpa looked shattered. He stood frozen beside the chair, blocking the vent. staring at the floor like he couldn't bear hearing her voice again. The whisper came once more. "Arthur." Grandpa's breathing became shaky. "Stop using her voice," he whispered. The room went silent immediately. Then another voice answered from inside the wall. Not Grandma this time. Male. Dry. Cold. "We only use what you remember." I felt every hair on my arms rise. Grandpa grabbed my wrist suddenly. "We're leaving this room." The second he pulled me toward the door, the vents around us exploded with noise. Banging. Scratch. Chink. Whispers overlapping so loudly, they almost sounded like a crowd, arguing behind the walls. The chair blocking the vent slid sideways across the floor by itself. I swear to God I saw the metal vent cover bulge upward slightly from underneath, like something pressed against it. Grandpa yanked the bedroom door open and practically dragged me into the hallway. The upstairs felt darker now, even though the lights were still on. Shadows stretched strangely across the walls. The air smelled dusty and wet, like old basements after flooding. Then I noticed every vent in the hallway was uncovered. The tape was gone, all of it. Grandpa stopped dead in his tracks when he saw them. "No," he whispered. I looked closer. The tape hadn't fallen off. It looked peeled away. Long thin strips hung from the edges, like someone removed them carefully from inside the vents. A cold breeze drifted through the hallway. Then came the whispering again. Not from one direction, every direction. Above us, below us, inside the walls. He stayed too long. He hears us now. Let him see. Grandpa hurried downstairs, pulling me with him. I nearly slipped, trying to keep up. He moved fast. Than I thought possible for someone his age. The whispering followed us the entire way. When we reached the living room, Grandpa immediately started pushing furniture in front of the vents. Coffee table, boxes, even an old bookshelf. His hands shook violently while he worked. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "They open wider at night," he muttered. That sentence made no sense, but his fear felt real, terrifyingly real. I noticed something then that made my stomach twist. The living room vent was breathing. Not air blowing out, breathing. The metal cover slowly pulled inward, then outward, then outward. Like lungs. Grandpa saw me staring at it and shoved the bookshelf harder against the wall. "Don't wash them too long," he snapped. The lights flickered overhead. Once, twice. Then all the whispering stopped at the exact same moment. Complete silence filled the house. Grandpa froze. That scared me instantly, because he looked like silence was worse. "What's wrong?" I whispered. He stared toward the hallway. "They're listening." The loud thump came from inside the wall beside us. I jumped backward. Another thump followed from the ceiling above, then another Benny. At the floor. Moving. Whatever was inside the vents wasn't staying in one place anymore. It was traveling through the house. Fast. The walls suddenly creaked all around us as if something heavy shifted inside them. Grandpa backed away slowly. They never moved this much. The vent behind the bookshelf let out a low metallic groan. Then a voice whispered clearly from inside it. "You brought him back." Grandpa shut his eyes tightly. "I know. You promised. I know." "Doch." His sudden scream echoed through the room. The walls instantly went quiet again. I stared at him in shock. "You knew this would happen?" Grandpa looked at me with tears in his eyes. For a second, he looked ready to say something. Then the TV turned on by itself. Static flooded the screen. Loud, violent. The sound made me flinch. Shapes flickered inside the static, for half a second at a time. Faces maybe. Hard to tell. Then the whispering started coming through the television speakers too. "You left us alone." We waited. So cold. Grandpa grabbed the remote and threw it hard against the wall. The TV stayed on. Static continued filling the room. Then, slowly, another sound mixed into tea. The noise. Breathing. Deep. Uneven. Coming from directly behind me. I turned around carefully. The hallway vent near the staircase was open. Wide open. I knew it had been closed earlier. The screws now sat loose on the carpet underneath it. Darkness filled the duct behind the vent. Darkness filled the duct behind the vent. Pure black. Then something moved inside. Not clearly. Just enough to make me stumble backward. A shape shifting deeper in the vent. Too large to fit comfortably inside. Grandpa saw it too. His entire face drained of color. No. 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 The breathing inside the vent became louder. Weh! Slow. And then I heard the sound that nearly made me throw up from fear. Crawling. Something crawling through the metal ducts toward us. The sound echoed through the walls and ceiling around the living room. Closer. Closer. Grandpa grabbed my shoulders hard. Listen to me carefully, he whispered desperately. If it talks to you directly, don't answer. The crawling stopped. Complete silence again. Then, from inside the vent behind me, my own voice whispered softly, "Why did you leave me here alone?" Hearing my own voice come from inside that vent nearly shattered my mind. It wasn't just similar. It was perfect. Every pause, every breath, every tiny detail. Like another version of me was trapped somewhere inside the walls, whispering through the darkness. I stumbled backward so hard I slammed into the couch behind me. Grandpa grabbed my arm before I could fall. "Don't answer it," he whispered again. But I could barely hear him over the sound of my heartbeat. The vent stayed open beside the staircase. Black. Empty. Breathing softly. Then my voice came again. "We waited for you." Not I. We. That single word made my stomach twist harder than anything else. Grandpa slowly backed away from the hallway. He kept his eyes locked on the vent like he expected something to crawl out at any second. "We have to go downstairs," he whispered.
Wow.
The basement. I stared at him like he was insane. Everything about that house already felt wrong, and now he wanted to go into the basement. But before I could argue, the vents above us suddenly rattled. Violently. The sound exploded through the house all at once. Metal shaking. Air hissing. Whispers rising louder and louder inside the walls. Grandpa's face tightened with fear. "They're getting angry." The lights flickered again. In the entire house went dark. Complete darkness swallowed everything instantly. I heard Grandpa curse under his breath. Then came the crawling sounds again. Much faster this time. Moving through the ceiling directly above us. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it clearly. Scraping. Dragging. Like elbows and knees, pulling something heavy through tight spaces. Closer. Closer. Then directly over our heads. The ceiling creaked loudly. Dust drifted down onto my face. Something stopped above the living room. Waiting. My breathing became shallow. Then the vent near the staircase slowly squealed open wider by itself. I heard the metal screws hit the floor, one by one. Bing, bing, bing. Grandpa grabbed my shoulder tightly. "Move," he whispered. We rushed through the dark hallway toward the basement door. I nearly tripped twice, because the house felt unfamiliar now. Wrong, somehow, like the layout itself had changed. The whispering followed us the entire way. Soft voices slipping through every vent we passed. "Arthur, don't leave. Stay with us." One voice sounded exactly like my mother. Another sounded like me as a child. By the time we reached the basement door, my hands were shaking. NG, uncontrollably. Grandpa unlocked 3 separate locks. 3. That terrified me immediately. "Why are there locks on the outside?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just pulled the basement door open slowly. Cold air rushed upward instantly. Not normal basement cold. This felt damp and rotten, like air trapped underground for years. Grandpa stepped down first, carrying a flashlight from the nearby shelf. The beam shook badly in his trembling hand. I followed reluctantly. The basement smelled like rust, mildew, and something older underneath both. Something stale. The stairs creaked loudly behind us. Then the basement door slammed shut on its own. I jumped violently. Grandpa didn't even react, like he expected it. The flashlight swept across old furniture covered in sheets, stacked boxes, and ancient pipes running across the ceiling. Then I noticed something strange immediately. Every vent pipe in the basement had symbols carved into it, small scratches. Dozens of them. Lines crossing over circles. Words scratched deep into the metal. "What is this?" I whispered. Grandpa didn't answer me right away. The flashlight beam shook across the basement walls while he stared at the carving. NGS on the vent pipes like he'd seen them 1,000 times before. Then he whispered something that made my chest tighten instantly. I stopped counting after the first few years. I looked closer at the scratches. Some of them weren't symbols at all. They were names. Dozens of names carved into the metal, some old and faded, some newer. I saw my grandmother's name near the furnace. Helen. The letters looked rushed, jagged, desperate. Then I noticed another one underneath it. My mother's name. Below that, mine. Fresh scratches. Still shiny against the metal. I stepped back immediately. No, I whispered. Grandpa looked exhausted. It learns the names, he said quietly. The basement suddenly felt even colder. The flashlight flickered once in his hand. Then the whispering started again. Not upstairs this time. Inside the basement. Close. The voices moved softly through the pipes overhead like air passing through lungs. We know him now. He came back. Open it. Grandpa moved quickly toward the old furnace in the corner. He dropped to his knees beside it and pulled away a wooden panel I hadn't noticed before. Behind it sat dozens of notebooks, stacked tightly together. Years of them. Some looked almost rotten with age. What is all this? I asked. My records, he muttered. The way he said it sounded ashamed. He grabbed one notebook and shoved it into my hands. I opened it carefully. Every page was filled with dates, whispers, descriptions, things heard through the vents. At first, the entries sounded almost normal. November 14th, scratching in kitchen vent again. December 2nd, Helen, heard crying upstairs. But the deeper I flipped, the worse it became. March 8th, it copied Helen's voice today. April 20th, it knows our names now. August 11th, do not answer if it asks questions. My hand started shaking harder with every page. Then I found an entry that nearly stopped my heart. October 27th, it asked about the baby before he was born. I looked up slowly. Grandpa wouldn't meet my eyes. That's me, I whispered. He nodded once. The basement suddenly felt too small, too tight. You knew about this before I was even born? Grandpa rubbed both hands across his face. It started learning faster after your grandmother got pregnant with your mother, he whispered. Every generation makes it stronger. The whispering in the pipes above us grew louder. The metal ducts creaked south, often overhead, like something shifting inside them. I stared at Grandpa. What is this thing? For the first time all night, he answered directly. I don't know. That terrified me more than any explanation could have, because his fear sounded real. I thought it was ghosts at first, he continued quietly. Then demons. Then maybe I was losing my mind. His eyes moved toward the ceiling. But crazy people don't hear the same voice together. A loud, metallic bang exploded somewhere above us. Both of us jumped. The pipes overhead rattled violently. Something was moving through them again. Fast. Grandpa immediately stood up. It found the basement. My pulse spiked. What do you mean, found it? Before he could answer, the whisper came clearly from the vent directly above us. My grandmother's voice. Soft, gentle. Arthur, let me in. Grandpa shut his eyes tightly like the sound physically hurt him. Then another voice joined hers. My mother's. Dad. I froze instantly. My mother was alive. I had spoken to her 3 days ago. But the voice sounded perfect. Every detail. The pipes overhead groaned loudly. Then came scratching. Directly above us now. Long, dragging sounds moving across the basement ceiling. The flashlight flickered again. For one brief second, the light caught something moving behind the vent above the furnace. Not a face, just pale movement, too fast to understand. I stumbled backward. Grandpa grabbed my shoulder hard. Listen carefully, he whispered. It only wants one thing. The vent above us let out a slow breath of cold air. Then my own voice whispered from inside it. Stay. Grandpa's expression collapsed completely. It wants permission. The words hit me like ice water. Every memory suddenly clicked together in my head. The voices asking questions. The whispering. The knocking. The constant attempts to make us respond. I looked at Grandpa in horror. It can't come out unless someone lets it. He nodded slowly. Then tears filled his eyes. I think your grandmother did. The room went silent. Even the whispering stopped. My stomach twisted painfully. What? Grandpa stared at the floor. She got lonely near the end, he whispered. The voices sounded kind at first. Comforting. The vent behind us creaked softly open. Neither of us moved. She started talking back when I wasn't around. He continued. Then one night, she disappeared for almost 3 hours. Cold sweat spread across my neck. When she came back, she wouldn't tell me where she'd been. Another metallic pop echoed from the ceiling. This time directly above my head. Grandpa looked up slowly. After that night, the voices sounded more human. The flashlight dimmed again. Then the basement filled with a sound. I'll never forget. Breathing. Not from the vents. Not from the pipes. From inside the walls themselves. Deep, heavy, close. The entire basement seemed to inhale around us. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The pipes trembled softly. Then every vent in the basement whispered at once. Not random voices. One sentence. Perfectly together. We know your family now. Grandpa slowly turned toward me. His face looked pale and hollow under the flashlight beam. Then he whispered the words that still wake me up at night. It doesn't haunt the house anymore. The breathing inside the walls suddenly stopped. Complete silence filled the basement. Then, somewhere directly behind us in the darkness, my